In this video, I'm going to talk about what to do if there's a problem in field. And this process would be the same whether you are coming at this from the perspective of the field supervisor or as a student. So if you are in a field placement relationship and there's a problem, we're going to kind of walk through that. So we use a phased problem-solving process, and this really, one, encourages students to be engaged as problem solvers. This is a good learning experience, is that when we're having a challenge, we want to deal with it directly and assertively, and a lot of times having clear communication will solve our problems. We also use the escalate as necessary principle. So we kind of start with the fewest people that need to be involved, and we move through that process as needed. And as I said, this process is going to work pretty much the same whether it is the student or the supervisor that's noticing the problem. So as we look at phase one, this is when a problem is identified, and this might be very small. At this phase one, we often don't notice when we're in phase one, but there's some sort of concern, and the best step here is to have a direct conversation. And so if you're the supervisor or the student, just having a direct conversation about what's going on and how it can be addressed. Oftentimes, this is the end of the process, in which case you probably won't notice that that was phase one, but that's kind of the initial problem. And if you reach out to the field liaison to let them know about the concern, this is usually the question they're going to ask. Have you talked about this yet? And if not, go ahead and do that, and then we'll go from there. And so if you've already had that conversation and the problem is still there, then we move to this phase two. So we slightly elevate. So at this point, we are going to talk more with the liaison. And so this is the person that's teaching the students field seminar. And so this liaison might make some suggestions. They might kind of reframe the situation to give some other perspective and encourage the student and the field instructor to readdress the concern with this new perspective in mind. Again, many times that will address the problem and things will be resolved. But if not, we move on to phase three. So this phase will involve the student and the supervisor and the liaison having a joint meeting together to discuss the specific concern. This should kind of address what's already been tried and come up with a clear plan. What's going to happen next and by when? So everyone at this meeting should know, hey, there is a concern. We're going to address it, and here's what our plan is, and here's when we're going to check back in to see if things are resolved. At this point, the liaison is going to notify the field director just so that I'm aware of what's going on and that there's potentially a problem brewing. But again, many things get resolved at this point in the phase. But if not, then we move to phase four. And so this is going to involve me as a field education director. So we would have a meeting with myself, with the liaison, the supervisor, and the student. There would be a clear and direct conversation about what's going on. Again, kind of this review of steps taken so far. What is the plan for resolution? At this point, we're going to have a very short turnaround. That if we've been dealing with a problem and we've escalated it up this high, we don't want to let things linger much longer. We want to figure out if this can be addressed or not. So we're going to have a pretty quick turnaround, depending on the circumstances. Maybe this is, a couple of weeks, but again, kind of looking at timing. And so we would have that clear plan. Make it, and we also make it clear at this point that the next step would likely lead to the placement being terminated. So this is kind of our last effort to salvage the placement. And at this point, I would notify the program director, so the MSW or BSW director, just so that they are aware. If we don't fix the problem by then we're in phase five. And so this is reached when the placement can't be salvaged. So if it's possible and appropriate, the field office would participate in a termination meeting with the field agency. That placement termination, so it kind of ending that placement, and that ends the involvement of the field agency. When a placement is terminated, this generally leads to an academic review. And this is not a punitive measure, but this is really just kind of an opportunity to figure out what happens next. So it depends on what happened and how we go about it. And so this review would involve the program director, the student's advisor, the field director, and then members of the appropriate committee and the student. And this gives the student kind of a chance to talk through what happened from their perspective. And then the committee would make a decision as to what do we do about the placement termination? Are we able to replace the student quickly within the same semester? Is this something that might need to be redone the following year, or other options? So I hope that this has been helpful. And I think one of the big takeaways here is that if you are having a challenge, please, refer to this process in our handbook, and let the field liaison know. Whether or not you need them to be intervening at this point, it's always helpful for your field liaison to know when there are concerns. Thank you.